2 days after I separated from my wife, she kept calling me to come back home. I told her that I was out of town for work and we needed to separate at least till the baby is born. My plan was to pick up my things after my current field assignment is over. At this point, I still pick up her phone calls and we are still on speaking terms. We spoke on the phone concerning her affair, and she would never admit that she's having an affair and still gets angry when I bring it up. She said she doesn't even understand why I'm separating from her because she hasn't cheated on me. I had no evidence to prove that she was having an affair, just my suspicion. She turned family and friends against me. She proactively made her case to my mom and dad and told them that I was abandoning her and lying about her. Then my parents called me up and they were completely on her side because they have fallen in love with the idea of being grandparents. I told them about my suspicions and the fact that she put her lover to detain and kick me out of my own house, and they just dismissed that. She got both my parents on her side, told them all kinds of lies, and then I received a call from her dad, threatening me. Her dad and I never got along. I hanged up the phone on him because I can't stand him, and he never liked me too, and that's okay. Like father, like daughter. We have 3 close mutual friends, and she called them first, crying to them, and the fact that she's pregnant caused them to sympathize with her. Everybody seemed to dismiss my concerns that she's having an affair. They thought that I was lying and that she wasn't that type of girl. I have already spoken to my lawyer to weigh my legal options against the police department because I was illegally detained and thrown out of my house, even though I was the one that was assaulted. And the policeman filed a false police report against me. Over the next 2 weeks, we went back and forth over the phone until we smoothed things out. She managed to get everybody on her side, including my parents. I had no evidence of an affair, only suspicions. At some point, I even started doubting myself. During the time we were separated, my neighbor kept an eye on my wife when he was home. He said the cop's car never showed up and my wife barely left the house, except during groceries or running errands. I thought maybe I was in the wrong for falsely accusing her of infidelity. Almost a month after the separation, my wife was about 6 months pregnant at the time. We reconciled and I moved back with my wife. It was like nothing happened, almost like the old times. She did everything she could to make sure that I didn't suspect anything. I was not home most of the time because of work. I couldn't get my neighbor to spy for me all the time because he has to go to work as well. So I installed multiple hidden cameras to catch her red-handed. I installed one in the bedroom, one in the living room, and one in my driveway. I traveled more times that month than any other time. I even traveled for an entire week sometimes so I could give her the opportunity to cheat. The camera was up for almost a month and I checked the footage religiously, but still no signs of her work partner, no suspicious behavior, and it was like nothing to see here. So I gave up. I still had my suspicions, but I had no proof since she wouldn't admit to anything and I had nothing to go on. Fast forward to when she was about 7.5 months pregnant. We had already forgotten about our troubled past. During this period, I reduced my travel region to just local so I can spend more time with my wife. I was spending more time with her now because she was almost due to give birth. Most of the time, I noticed that she was always texting on her phone. At first, I thought it was her friend and parents, so I paid no mind, till it started to bother me because it got to a point where I couldn't even enjoy my time with her without someone texting her phone. The most suspicious thing was about how she answered her phone, the way she smiled and chuckled and tried to hide it like she didn't want me to notice. I didn't think a woman in her condition would cheat. She was almost 8 months pregnant at the time. One evening we were watching TV and her phone text notification came up. She picked it up and walked straight into the bathroom. It was so obvious that she was hiding something. I reduced the volume of the TV and went closer to the door of the bathroom to see if I can listen to her conversation. But all I heard was her texting. That was when I started suspecting that something wasn't right. She had an iPhone that needs fingerprint verification, and we don't know each other's password. So I waited till she fell asleep. When she slept, I used her fingerprints to unlock her phone. Then I quietly crept to the bathroom to read her text. The last number she was texting was named Sophie. The strange thing about the caller ID is that there's only one text message from Sophie saying sweet dreams. Seemed totally innocent, right? But how is it that you have been texting in the bathroom for almost 30 minutes to one person and the only text message visible was just one phrase from that person that says sweet dreams? The caller ID that texted her before Sophie was almost 3 hours ago, so the only person she had been texting was Sophie. So right then, my spider sense was up again, and the only rational answer to this is that she deleted the text message to hide evidence. I felt sick to my stomach at that point, knowing that she's up to her old tricks, or maybe never stopped cheating but took it underground. I copied Sophie's number down and slowly crawled back next to her in bed. I barely slept that night. The next day, during lunch break, I went to a payphone and called the number. I already suspected that it was her patrol partner, so I acted like I was a utility company by mentioning his name, and he said, "This is me." All my suspicion came back, and I knew I wasn't crazy. When I returned home that day, I didn't really have any energy to confront her at this point because I was exhausted, plus she's due to give birth. I planned on leaving her after the baby was born, but every time I look at her with her pregnant belly, I feel so attached to her and want to spend the rest of my life with her. I didn't understand why she can't just be loyal so we would make a perfect family. I wanted to ask her why she wouldn't stop chatting up her patrol partner. Why continue to lie and torture me so much? I was visibly depressed and anxious about the baby at the same time. A few months later, she gave birth to a baby boy. It never came across my mind that the baby wasn't mine. I thought the baby looked like me, and at that age, it's really hard to tell. It is anybody's guess. After she gave birth and was discharged from the hospital, I allowed a few days to pass before I confronted her about the text messages, and she lied that it was a female friend of hers. Then I told her that I called the number and her patrol partner picked up. She denied it. Then I told her to open the text and dial the number on speakerphone, and she refused. So I decided that I've heard enough of her lies. I told her that I'm sick of it, and I will move out of this house again. She pleaded with me. Then she admitted that it was her former patrol partner and that she hid his name because he continues to keep in touch, and she didn't want to seem ungrateful by ignoring him. And she knows that I will be upset if I found out, which is why she used a fake name. I told her that I want her to quit her job as a police officer and find another job, and she agreed. She also agreed to block his number and go no contact with him. She blocked his number right in front of me. I'm not stupid. I know she could unblock it and take the affair underground, but she's making an effort to ensure that I don't leave. Things went fine with no hiccups. Our family came over and we had celebrations upon the arrival of the new baby. We even went looking for houses to buy because the house we were staying in was rented. I began traveling for work more frequently to make enough money for a down payment. A new baby and an unemployed wife aren't exactly cheap, but I was happy to be a new father. She wanted to take some time off from work for about a year so she can spend time with the baby. And I agreed because I'd rather her take care of the baby than sending him to daycare or get a babysitter, at least till the baby get a little older. Fast forward a few months later, while I was on my field assignment, I noticed that I would call her sometimes and she wouldn't pick up or return my calls. I would call her in the evening when I know she should be home, but she wouldn't answer my calls. She's unemployed and does nothing but take care of the baby, yet she wouldn't pick up the phone. I asked my neighbor, and he told me that my wife doesn't spend most of the time at home when I'm gone. I thought she was up to her old tricks again, and there was no way she would admit to anything unless she was caught red-handed. So when I returned home that week, I bought a GPS and installed it in her car. I wanted to know where she was taking the child to whenever I'm not home, and why she wouldn't answer my calls for hours, and the unexplained time she goes missing. I told my boss that I want only local jobs for the rest of the month. That way I can monitor the GPS. I told my wife that I will be traveling out of state so I can be able to follow her to wherever she goes when I'm not home. And sure enough, the same day I pretended like I was going out of state, that evening she drove to a particular apartment that I wasn't familiar with. It was a gated apartment, so I couldn't get in until another car opened the gate. I finally got in and parked a few cars away from her car. She had already left her car and went into one of the units in the apartment building. I didn't see her go in. I didn't know which unit it was, so I just waited in my car. I came up with a plan to call and ask her where she was to see if she would be honest. I called her while she was in the apartment, but she didn't pick up. Then she called me back about 30 minutes later. I asked her why it took her so long to pick up my calls, and she said she was taking care of the baby. I mentioned that there is a lot of noise in the background, and I asked her if she was home, just to trick her to see if she would lie to me. She responded by saying that she was home. I then told her that my trip was cancelled and I will be home in less than 30 minutes. She went silent, didn't know what to say. She kept stuttering her words. I asked her what was wrong, and she said everything was fine, and that it's just that she wasn't expecting me to come back home so early, that now she has to prepare stuff and clean the house. I asked her what she was talking about. What does she have to prepare? She just kept blabbering and digging herself in more holes. It was very clear to me that she had been caught. She abruptly hung up, saying that she would call me back in a few minutes, that the baby was crying. About 10 minutes later, I saw her rushing out of the apartment. She had the baby swing in one hand, and on the other hand, she had the baby bag. And guess who was behind her, as if he was the father? She opened the trunk of the SUV, and her former patrol partner was right behind her. Obviously, she was still in contact with him, and she didn't block his number. He was carrying the baby like it was his. The man has his own family and 3 kids, and had a house with his family in the suburbs, and it looks like they rented an apartment just to see each other. Nevertheless, I knew something was up. The way he was carrying the baby made me question the paternity of the baby. I couldn't take it any longer. I immediately got out of the car and confronted them. They were both shocked to see me there. I told her that she shouldn't bother coming back home, and that I have caught her red-handed, and they both should stay in their little apartment. She didn't apologize. She didn't say anything. She just hurried into the car because they have been caught. They got into her car and sped off the apartment parking lot. I immediately got into my car and called her stupid dad. I told him what just happened, and I told him to his face that his daughter is a harlot, just like I predicted. I told him that I don't believe the child belongs to me, and that I'm getting a paternity test. I told him that the baby belongs to a man with 3 kids and already married. I will admit that I did lose my cool, but I have no regrets. This woman had been playing with me for years. She has been lying to me and gaslighting me for years. I have exposed her and smoked them out of their hiding place like rats. If she doesn't want to be with me, why didn't she just leave me alone during our separation? Why did she manipulate me and everyone around me to get us back together? I went home and she wasn't there as expected. The next day she called me crying, telling me that she didn't do anything wrong, that she needs to come back home because of the baby. She told me that the baby stuff like milk, bottle, clothes are at the house, and she needs to come back home because she feels restless and the baby has been crying. I told her that she's free to come back home and that I am leaving because I don't think the baby is mine and I am getting divorced for good this time. She responded that the baby is mine, that if I deny my child, I will regret it. I told her that we need a paternity test so I know that the baby belongs to me. I told her that obviously she didn't block her former patrol partner and she can't lie and tell me that there's nothing going on between them. She came back home with one of her female friends. Apparently she was afraid that I would do something to her, and she know that if she brings her former patrol partner, that things would escalate. So she brought her female friends with her. That day, I ordered a DNA kit online and overnight it. I refused to speak to her that day. I gave her the silent treatment, and she kept telling me to talk to her with her friend present. I didn't speak to her because I might get emotional. I had bonded with this baby. Everything the baby owns was bought by me. So I know myself enough that if I attempt to speak to her, that I would start crying, because it was difficult to me to imagine that the child might not be mine. When the DNA test kit arrived, I couldn't find the chance to get the baby alone in order to get a swab, because she was always with the baby. Her friend has left by now, because she saw that I was no threat. It wasn't until the 3rd day that we started talking. I only started talking to her so she would allow me to carry the baby, even if it was the last time. I really love kids, and I wanted to be a father. At the time, I wished the baby was mine, and I hoped the paternity test would prove it. I was able to get a chance to collect some genetic material and ship the sample without my wife's knowledge. When the results came back, I was in another part of the city for work. I was able to view the results online, and I'm really sad to say that the baby was not mine. I sent the result to my parents and blamed them for doubting me. I was not shoving it down their throats because I wish I was wrong. I also sent the result to her father to remind him that his daughter is a tramp. My wife was the last person that got the result, and she didn't get it from me. After all she put me through, she must have known that the baby wasn't mine. We don't have any property together, so it shouldn't be a long drawn-out divorce. According to the law, I am the legal father of the child because I was married to the child's mother when the child was born, and I signed the birth certificate. I have to go through the court to terminate the parent-child relationship and support obligation and terminate the marriage as well. I called a lawyer to get my wife served as quickly as possible. Update. It's been 14 months since I divorced my wayward wife, and a lot has happened since then. I moved away from the city I grew up in because I was constantly being harassed by police. I filed complaints twice and sued them twice, and I won one case, but the harassment continued. So I decided to move out of town because I'm always traveling for work. I wanted to move to the countryside because I like hunting and camping. Half the time I'm away for work, so it doesn't really matter to me where I live. Plus, I bought 9 acres of land to hunt and camp when I'm not running around the country working. What transpired after my wife was served at my house when I was out of town was total pandemonium. She kept calling me, but I refused to answer her calls. 2 days after she was served, I came back home with a U-Haul to move out my things. She was home when I got there and tried to stop me, but I only took things that were mine and left everything that we shared. She knew I was done with the marriage, and everybody now know what kind of person she was. She can no longer go around manipulating everybody because they all saw the paternity results. After I finished packing all my things, before I left home, I told my ex-wife to allow me to hold the baby for one last time, and she did. I really wish that I was the dad, and I loved the child. When she saw me holding the baby, she started crying, saying she was sorry for everything. I immediately gave her back the baby because I was about to start crying as well. I didn't want her to see me cry. I was able to move in with my parents because I couldn't find a place that I liked. My plan was to stay with my parents and continue to save money. That was before I moved out of town to the countryside, where I bought a huge acre of land with my own small lake. I can hunt and camp on my own land when I'm not running around the country. I spent most of my time traveling, and I'm loving the nomad lifestyle. But when I return home, I return to a quiet place that I call my own. It still bothered me that the only people that would suffer through all this is me, my ex-wife, and the innocent baby, and not her affair partner. Although I can't say for sure that he is the father of the baby, all circumstantial evidence prove that he is. The fact that they have been working together for over a year and seen each other for almost 2 years now, and the neighbor caught him coming to my house, presumably to bang my wife. They got exposed, and he rented an apartment to meet up with my wife. I gathered all the evidence, including the paternity result, to expose him. I wanted to find his wife and send it to her. I subscribed to a paid service and was able to locate where he lives and the identity of his wife. I located his home in the suburbs and waited till I was sure he drove to work and his wife was home. So I went and delivered the package. Then one evening, when I was coming back from a friend's house, I got stopped by a cop. I wasn't speeding or had violated any laws, so I was curious why he stopped me. When the patrol car pulled me over, at first I thought it was my ex-wife affair partner, but it was somebody else that I haven't seen before. I haven't been stopped by a cop in years, so this was very random to me. He claimed that I was going 10 miles above the speed limit, and I disputed his claim. He gave me a ticket anyway, saying that I should appear in court, etc. Well, if you know the court system, you will know that it will cost you more to dispute a ticket, so I rather take the ticket and defensive driving to remove it out of my record, rather than wasting my time going to trial. Time that could be spent doing important things. I thought of it as a slight aggravation. Then not even a week after I got the ticket, I received another ticket for speeding again. I knew that I wasn't speeding. I knew what it was about. Police harassment. I was being targeted. This time I lost my cool because the police was knowingly taunting me. First, he asked me for my license and registration, and then he started asking me stupid questions, like if I have a warrant. After he already ran my ID and found nothing, he was also asking me if I stole the car. Then he got mad when I told him to his face that his questions are effing stupid. He ordered me out of my car. I refused and told him to call his supervisor, that I had done nothing wrong. He called for backup and they dragged me out of the car very violently and handcuffed me. I had laceration on my hands, bruised ribs, and back pain from police brutality. I spent the night in jail, and my parents had to bail me out. They knew exactly what it was all about, and I filed a complaint against the arresting officers. My ex-wife affair partner was smart enough to let others do his dirty work. My parents thought it was too risky for me to stay in that town, and I wanted to move out of the country. That was when I decided that I wanted to move out to the countryside, because the police here are out to get me. Literally. I was lucky they didn't plant any kind of paraphernalia in my car. Then I might risk false imprisonment and lose my job and freedom. So I'm not going to risk my livelihood for some G.I. Joe wannabe with a badge. I filed a lawsuit against my wife's affair partner for filing a false police report, sued the 2 police officers that arrested me for unlawful arrest, resulting in false imprisonment. Since it was a civil litigation, the burden of proof is on me, so I must prove that the claim against my wife's affair partner was under the balance of probabilities. I have proof that the arresting officer during my domestic violence case was my wife's former work partner. I have proof that I was the one that was assaulted by her and not the other way around. And also record shows that she didn't call 911, but called him on his personal cell phone number. I have proof of ongoing affair between the officer and my ex-wife. I have proof that the child isn't biologically mine. I was lucky to have won a settlement from the case, and the judgment was rendered against my ex-wife affair partner. Although the recent false imprisonment case was dismissed, and I'm going to run it back through the court again, I went back to the police department and filed a complaint against my ex-wife affair partner using the civil judgment. And the last I heard, he received a disciplinary action, and it will be on his record. Not sure what kind of disciplinary action took place, or if it was some BS in a corrupt police department. But I know that at least it will be on his record. The last time I heard, my ex-wife affair partner separated from his wife. I gave her all the evidence, and she got rid of him for good, which is why he's taking all his anger out on me, using the power of the law. I haven't spoken to my ex-wife since then, but I heard from mutual friends that she's back working at the police department. Unbelievable. And she's living with the affair partner in the same apartment that I caught them in. Within a few months after I moved out of the city, I started dating again, mostly online dating. I usually know the city I'm going to a week in advance, so I will set up online dates before I get there. I have been meeting women in every city I go to, and sometimes most of them are marriage material. I haven't thought about getting married again, and I may not get married again because I felt like I have wasted many years of my life being deceived and gaslighted. Thank you for staying to the end of this story. Please share your opinion on the comment section, like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you.